Now I'm going to use a quick clip to demonstrate Seahorse Baian in action. The first thing you'll see is his ripple defense. So this will grant him immunity against full enemy attack. So soon you'll see some blue Chinese character popping up which stand for immunity. There, just now, did you see those four Chinese characters popping up really fast? That was his immunity. Now, obviously, because I only have Seahorse Baian, that's the only one in my team right now. That's why those Chinese characters pop up really fast, and his ripple defense went away quite quickly. But in a normal battle, when you have other allies, this ripple defense do sustain quite a bit longer. Now I will demonstrate the compulsory interruption of his ultimate skill. So take a look at the front two enemies. There. Did you see that? So Marine dodged it, but Misty was affected by my ultimate and fell down. And that's the compulsory interruption there. I will demonstrate it once again. Okay, Marine dodged it again, but Misty fell down. So there you go. This is the compulsory effects, compulsory interruption effect of Seahorse Baian's ultimate. Now I'm going to talk about a few formation ideas for Seahorse Baian. I'm on the international version of the game now, just to demonstrate what would be available immediately as soon as the character is released. Obviously, he's not in the game right now, so I'll use Libradoku to represent him. So, as I mentioned previously, Seahorse Baian's biggest characteristic is his ripple defense, where he's able to provide more defensive support to your other frontline ally. So because of this, what you definitely want to avoid is having another defensive protector up front alongside with your Seahorse Baian, such as your Taurus or Libradoku, for example. Because a lot of time you find the likes of Libradoku always end up to be the last man standing already. And for Taurus, because he actually have this ability at the start where he will inflict the damage he absorb onto the enemy. Both of them, they don't really want to have ripple defense activated on them because it's kind of a bit of waste or countering their own abilities. So you definitely do not want to have another Protector Knight up front alongside with Seahorse Baian. And what that means instead is actually it opens up the flexibility for you to bring a more damage dealing character up front instead. So a few good choices could be Leo. It could be Cancer Desmos. It could even be Sagittarius. Now, all of them are pretty good choices because they all have a bit of a skill which let them self-recover. So Leo, for example, his ultimate, when he deals damage, he'll recover X percentage of that into his health. For Cancer Desmos, when an enemy dies, he also recovers health. Similarly for Sagittarius, for his clothes, he get kind of this life stealing leeching ability at high level, and also at level 30 maximum close, he also get a short period of immunity. So because of this, they're actually pretty good to pair up with Seahorse Baian up front. Now, if it's just them by themselves, they are really fragile. So you normally tend to see they wouldn't really last long enough in the battle for them to really take effect. And because they're main damage dealer, you kind of want them to be there because they will be the main ones, doing all of the attacks for you. So you definitely don't want them to die out quickly. However, they're just a bit too fragile by themselves. Now, with Seahorse Baian alongside Wisdom, that's a different story. Because what you find is that once their health kind of goes down, Ripple Defense will be activated just over time, so to protect them from any future damage. And during the period where Ripple Defense is up, because typically your skill will also be available, then you could use your own skills to kind of let them self-recover their health. And so when the Ripple Defense is down again, your character's kind of back to maximum health or a lot of health again, and let them absorb a bit more damage. And once they're low again, likelihood of ripple defense will be activated again, and then you can also self-recover at the same time, etc. So it will just make them last a lot longer in battle because of this. So those are all very good choices to pair up with Seahorse Baian. Now, let's also talk about formation bonuses. Sequence Bond is a wind attribute knight, and as we all know, you kind of benefit from formation bonuses when you bring in characters of multiple of the same elements, etc. Now, the problem with wind attribute is right now, uh, Aquarius Camus, he's a very good character, but he's not really in the meta right now. He will get a lot more support in the future and synergy in the future when other characters such as the Golden Close version of Hugo is released, and also there's another Marina coming up called Kraken Isaac. Now, both of them have kind of a synergy with Aquarius Camus because they all do additional effects when the enemy is frozen, and also they have lots of attacks to make the enemy um, freeze up, etc. So Aquarius Camus, I think, would be coming to one of the meta teams going in the future, but right now you don't really see him much. The most common wind attribute knights you will see is actually Libradoko and Misty. And if you remember what I mentioned earlier about Seahorse Baian, can't really pair up with another defensive knight. Both Misty and Libradoko, you typically see them in the front line because they're pretty defensive. So they are not really a good choice alongside with Seahorse Baian. So because of this, you typically don't want to have Seahorse Baian in a formation with lots of wind attribute knights, etc. So instead, what's probably more common is for Seahorse Baian to be in a rainbow formation, and this is as of now before any new wind character is released. You probably want to put Seahorse Baian in a rainbow colored five different element formation. So if we talk about light and dark characters right now, there's only limited few. So you have the two versions of Sega and also Shaka, who is obviously locked behind high VIP. So that's kind of out of the question. But in terms of the Segas, I would recommend the normal Sega as opposed to your evil Sega. This is because Librodoko sorry, not Librodoko. This is because Seahorse Baian has this loads of his skills actually inflict debuffs on your opponents to reduce their attacking speed. So it's kind of there to slow the game down. Now, Evil Sega is the best at the start of the game, where he tried to deal lots of damage, whereas the normal Sega more peaks towards the end of the game because he takes time to warm up. So because of this, you want to pair up with a normal Sega over Evil Sega if possible, because just so sequels bar and slow the game down, and then once everyone's debuffed and the game is slow, your normal Sega will then have the potential to go past 30-40 second mark and then unleash his full power, etc. So normally you want to bring normal Sega as opposed to evil Sega. And then because you want this, you want to drag out the game a bit longer, I would recommend bringing a support knight as well. I would probably recommend bringing Hamlet Siren. He's just a very good character and also would help to reduce attack on the back line. So once again, you have Seahorse Baian reducing the amount of attacks to be inflicted on your front line because of ripple defense. You have Honda Styrian with a skill to reduce the damage on your backline. So that's also very good synergy there. So those three I would kind of recommend go together. And then you have a lot more choices for your other two slots. You definitely want damage dealers for sure. I would probably recommend you bring Deathmars. And as for fire, you have a lot of options really. You have Leo, you can bring Sagittarius, you can even bring Iris Moon if you want even more healing defensive power. Um, but I'll probably say Sagittarius, let's take for example. And like I said, you can put Sagittarius or Deathmars up front. All of them are fine because Ripple Defense will be there to provide that bit of support. And also there's a bit of synergy between Sagittarius and Hound Styrian as well, because Sagittarius recharges a bit of Cosmo whenever someone else recharges Cosmo on your team, and Hound Styrian is a fast recharging Cosmo character. He recharges his own Cosmo very quickly. So this is probably the best team for Seahorse Baian in my eye when he is first released. in the into the game. Now, going to long term, I will talk about kind of the other formations for Seahorse Baian as well, just so you kind of know whether his was a long term investment. Now, one of the future character to be released is Poseidon. Poseidon is like a tier 0 character. You will see him in probably 60-70% of all of the high level teams, etc. Very, very good character. And one of his signature skills is that for the first 5 seconds of the game, he will be immune to all damages. And on top of being immune to all damages, any damage inflicted on him that he would have taken would be reflected straight back to the enemies. So because of this, you typically want to put Poseidon up in the front row so that he takes as much damage as possible for the first 5 seconds, and as a result, deal as much damage as possible to the enemies for those 5 seconds. But then what you realize is that that's his only defensive ability. If you put him on the front line, he's a bit too fragile for him to last any longer past the 5 second mark. And that's where kind of Seahorse Baian once again coming in to help to kind of provide that defensive support after the 5 seconds. Because it's very likely after the first 5 seconds, you will see Poseidon kind of health start going down, but also at the same time, Ripple Defense being a looping skill, it's probably be active around the same time. So it has a pretty good synergy with Poseidon, and because Poseidon is such a tier 0 character, um, Seahorse Buying will be another one to watch out in the future if you want to consider for long-term team building perspective. Lastly, I'm gonna compare Seahorse Buying with Libradoko because both are wind attribute protectonites and they actually have a lot of similarities. And it'd be good to understand what are they used for in order to for you to make up your mind on whether to get Seahorse Buying in the future. Now, the first thing to take note of is Libradoko's ultimate inflict compulsory interruption to the back three enemies, where a Seahorse Baian would only be able to do that to the two frontline enemy. So depending on where you want to interrupt the skill, so that could be depending on the enemy formation. If they have, their damage dealer, where you really want to interrupt at the back, then you probably would choose Libradoko. If they're actually at the front, then you would choose Seahorse Baian, etc. So this has been more situational. Um, the next similarity between Libradoko and Seahorse Baian is their clothes. Um, Libradoko applies rejuvenation to a front row ally, um, which basically means that they will be able to heal a bit. And the idea behind this is so that they will live longer in the battle, where Seahorse Biome would provide ripple defense to your front row ally. So once again, idea try to make them live longer. Ripple defense, in my eyes, is a lot better than rejuvenation, especially in maps when the enemies are a lot higher level than you, because they will do so much damage to you. Your rejuvenation is not going to catch up enough. You just won't be able to heal fast enough. Whereas Ripple Defense is purely based on the number of counts, so that's actually really useful regardless of what level your opponents are. So on this aspect, I'll probably say Seahorse Bind is the winner. However, Libradoko, what you will notice is that at level 20 of his clothes, he also grant your allies 4 buffs on attack, attacking speed, crit, and crit damage. And this is typically the role Libradoko is playing. Libradoko is trying to be the last one standing in the team, and while being the last one standing, provide a boost to everyone else in the team. Where Seahorse Bayern is on the other mentality, where you are trying to preserve your front line as long as possible, so that your remaining team would be able to free up to do damage and not have to worry about on the defensive side. So depending once again situational, in battles where you really want to deal a lot of damage in a short amount of time, for example with Evil Sega, with your Desma, with Sagittarius, you potentially want to bring Libradoko because you want to get that extra buff on your attack and especially go for that crit damage. However, if you are in a battle where you actually want to make the battle be a slower pace and make the battle be longer, for example, if you have good Seiya who benefit from 30 or 40 seconds into the game, etc., then you actually want to slow down the game. And this occasions, Seahorse Baian will be so much better because he not only provides defensive boost to your other front line, but also all of his attacks actually slows down the enemy's attacking speed. So, think of Libradoko as slightly more offensive support and supports your own allies, whereas Seahorse Bind is more of a defensive support and also debuff your opponents instead. So the two are very similar, and very situational depending on when you want to bring in each character. Now, having said that, you probably would notice if they're so similar, should you even get Secret Bind? And I would agree with you. If you already have a very high level Libradoko, then there is probably not a need for you to get a Secret Bind anymore because the two satisfy very similar roles. However, if you do want, if you're starting completely from the scratch, you don't really have a high level Libradoko right now, and you do want someone to play that role, I would suggest getting Seahorse Baian over Libradoko. One, its skill set to me is slightly better. Um, and also two, it is a slightly cheaper character compared to Libradoko. Libradoko is kind of considered in the same class as Sagittarius, for example, because when you go to your observatory, if you look at your wish card, etc., you wouldn't see Libradoko appearing, just like how you wouldn't see Sagittarius appearing in the wish card. However, when Seahorse Baian will be released, he's actually in the same category as Mermaid so he would be appearing in wish card, and that makes him a lot easier for you to obtain this character. Furthermore, in any kind of redemption shops, for example, Valor, guild shops, etc. Well, not guild shop, guild war shops, sanctuary shops, etc. He will always be cheaper than Libradoko at the equivalent price. So I would definitely suggest if you don't have Libradoko trained up, then do get Sequels Bind. And like I mentioned before, he still has a bit of a role to play once Poseidon's released. In fact, they're a very good combo. So if you do want to invest for the future, then potentially recommend getting Sequels Bind as well.